we watched Sister Wives season 6, episode 7, I think. And that was one of the polygamous questions answered. And I already discussed the first half of this, which is they asked the adults what their most embarrassing moment was. I already discussed Christine. So now I'm going to talk about Kody. So what really surprised me was Christine's was the wedding dress incident and when she like raced off. Now, when they got to Kody, I thought he was going to say the same thing. I thought he was going to say, if it was me and I had gotten caught doing something wrong, that would have been mine. Or even just someone accusing me of doing something wrong. That would have been my thing. But apparently he doesn't see it as being, I guess he agrees with Christine that that was her embarrassing situation, not his embarrassing situation. I was also kind of surprised that Robin didn't say it was the wedding dress incident. Because at the time she claimed how that was so embarrassing for her because Kody wasn't supposed to tell anyone. And now, anyway, but what he actually said was in the first season when him and Mary went out to dinner and she asked, how would you feel about it if I had another husband? And he's like, the vulgarity of you with another man. So what was interesting is here we're talking about many years later. I think it would be at least 3 or 4. I have to go look at the timeline. Years later, and they ask him, what's the most embarrassing thing that's happened? And he still points to that. So there's many layers. First, because he describes it as, I was looking toward the door. I was trying to run out. It was so awful that we had this discussion about that. Now, to me, well, first of all, my first thought was, this seems like a very normal conversation that I would assume people would have in polygamy, which is the unevenness of the fact that she has to deal with her jealousy, but he doesn't have to deal with any jealousy. There is no one ever asking him to expand the bounds of his emotions or that or this or that. All they're really asking him to do is to invest. If he has multiple wives, invest in multiple wives, which of course later on he said he didn't want to do. But what was interesting is I said, I think my husband and I have more difficult conversations on a weekly basis than apparently they have ever. I think it was also embarrassing to him because she flat out brought up the fact that this setup is unfair. And maybe so he was embarrassed because they were all supposed to just pretend that somehow this wasn't a difficult situation. I don't really know. But I think the core question that I've had for a while about Kody and Mary is, Kody's claiming he never loved Mary. And now we know that before the show even started, he melted down his wedding ring because he didn't want Mary to have a tie on him. And I do believe that. But I also believe, especially watching these early seasons, that he did have some level of great affection for her. Now, I'm not going to get into the did he love her or didn't he? He's a narcissist. Can he love her? Does he love her as much as Robin? I think a lot of that is splitting hairs that don't need to be split. I think he had a great deal of affection and that he is now denying that affection ever. He is now claiming that was all an act. I do not believe he's that good of an actor because we see him in season 16, 17, 18 saying things like, well, I really love you a lot and I have always been a good person. And we're like, no, you're not. Like any of these scenes in the later, we'll say even like the last 8 seasons of the show, you can see his clear disdain for Christine, for Mary, and eventually for Janelle. But I think that the fact that he considers that an embarrassing conversation, I think he genuinely did have affection for her. I think he really did have this revulsion at the idea of any of his wives, even Mary, being with someone else. I think it did gross him out. I think he did have affection for them. I think that affection faded over time. I don't think he invested in it. I don't think he did the things that are necessary. Love is more than just like ooey gooey feelings. You have to invest and make sacrifices. And I don't think he wanted to do any of that. And I think the more he was around Robin, the more he just sort of shifted his attention until one day he was like, wow, I'm really not in love with these people anymore. But I thought it was interesting that when they asked for what could be his most embarrassing moment, that he picked that. And I think that that's really telling about his view on polygamy, the fact that it was so embarrassing that somebody pointed out to him the unequalness of the situation. I think also that conversation and how he handled it showed that he did have great affection for Mary at that time. He was pushing her away and he was definitely doing things. I do think he melting the ring was specifically so she didn't have a hold on him, but I don't think that means that he didn't have affection for her. I think he's just a selfish dude who, loved her but didn't want her, held her at arm's length or whatever. But anyway, that is my discussion on Kody's answer to the question, what's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you on the show?